force people to do something with their money. In other words, they wouldn't save it, they would take it out and spend it, but some people would take it out and put it under the mattress and so forth. So it's a little bit difficult to implement practically. But what you can do, and this has happened, and this will be the case for many years to come, is to have negative real interest rates. In other words, here you have in the 70s negative real interest rates. That was a period of the last big commodities boom, with gold going from $35 to $850 an ounce in January 1980. Then we had a period of positive interest rates, and then lately we have again negative interest rates. I have to point out to this. The way they calculate here real interest rates, in other words, inflation adjusted, they take essentially the consumer price index. The consumer price index does not reflect the cost of living increase of the typical household in the United States. I mean, I have really a large readership, and so I ask my readership, if anyone has the feeling that his cost of living are increasing by less than 5%, to please send me an email. So nobody sent an email except one person. He said, my cost of living have dropped 30%. I lost my girlfriend. So I sent him an email back and said, you just wait until you see the replacement costs. No, but it is a fact. I mean, most people, their cost of living are going up much more than what the governments are telling you the rate of inflation is. So we have negative real interest rates. What does it mean for an investor? Negative real interest rates mean that essentially if you take a 10 years view, and you have cash, and you put it on deposit, the purchasing power of that cash will go down. In other words, you're guaranteed to lose money. I would also suggest that negative real interest rates are negative for bond prices in the long run. In other words, they are inflationary. On the other hand, they are probably positive for some kind of investments. But as I said, you will have this volatility. Nasdaq first, then housing, commodities, then the third maybe equities in emerging markets or whatnot. But the problem for the investor is it doesn't happen all at the same time. The other thing is, a client of mine told me, look, if I put my money on deposit, yes, I know I'm losing, say, 3–4% in real terms every year. So the purchasing power drops by 3–4%. But it's still better than to give my money to a Swiss bank and they lose 30% per annum. So I said, yeah, probably. So you understand, that is the tricky part. It penalizes also savers, people who have, saved all their life. They put the money on deposit. They never speculated in their lives. You force them to speculate now. The other unintended consequence of easy monetary policies is that essentially commodity prices in the last few years have gone up more than they would have had interest rates been high in real terms. We have long-term commodity cycles. I don't want to repeat everything here, but basically these long cycles, these are price cycles, not business cycles. They last 45 to 60 years. And so you have these peaks in commodity prices. And the last peak was here in January 1980. And then we were in a bear market for commodities until 1998. And as a result of the incremental demand coming from China, commodity prices started to go up, but they went up more because of easy monetary policy. So you had a huge boom in some commodities, as we shall see. And that has, of course, also implications socially, because during the rising wave of commodities you have shortages, and because not every group of a society consumes the same quantity of commodities as a percent of his income, it hurts the lower classes of society more than the well-to-do people, as I shall explain in a second. The next unintended consequence, and I have to re-emphasize this because until, say, 2 years ago, hardly anyone talked about excessive credit growth being destabilizing. Here you have debt as a percent of the economy. You can see in the 1920s it went up strongly, and then we had the 1929 crash, the Depression years, and then we have a long period of deleveraging, where debt to GDP drops from 186% in 29 to around 140% here. When the US went into World War II in 1942, we were at 140% debt to GDP, and in 1980 we're still at 140% debt to GDP. But under the influence of these Keynesians, the overall level of debt makes no difference. One person's liability is another person's asset. Go explain that to the Greeks or to the French banks and so forth. Under this influence, nobody paid any attention to the excessive credit growth that occurred over the last 20 years. In particular, Mr. Bernanke and Mr. Greenspan, they totally disregarded this excessive credit growth. During the period 2000 to 2007, credit increased in the US at 5 times the rate of nominal GDP. And whereas here in 29 we had a debt to GDP ratio of 186%, and now we have a debt to GDP ratio of 379%. The difference, and this is an important point, is in 29 we didn't have Social Security, we didn't have Medicare and Medicaid, and now we have them, and the unfunded liabilities. These are liabilities that are coming due, which have not been funded. So if you added these unfunded liabilities, would be up there in the 5th floor of this building, debt to GDP. But you, as an investor, you have to think, what are the implications of this? Obviously, in my opinion, the US will continue to pursue expansionary monetary policies. They'll have to monetize debt continuously.